Hey, everyone. Everyone knows that game day is not till Saturday, right? You guys know that's really, yes, Saturday. ESPN, it's coming. First off, thank you so much for having me. I want to just thank the C21 Center, my colleagues and friends there, but especially the Student Advisory Board. And I'd like to ask all of you to give them a round of applause for all their wonderful work to put these events on each semester. You don't realize how much work goes into it. All right. You all saw, or many of you saw the flyers about the game. What is this about the game and your life in the game? Well, anyone that knows me knows that I'm a sports fanatic. In fact, lunatic is probably the correct word when it comes to sports. Sports radio, Twitter. I can tell you right now that 6 Boston College Eagle running backs touched the football last Saturday in the big win against Virginia Tech. I could tell you that Nathan Eovaldi of the Boston Red Sox threw 7 innings in an 18-inning World Series game, of which 9 other pitchers pitched for the Red Sox. I can also tell you that Tom Brady threw to 8 different wide receivers, 7 of which caught passes. And I can also tell you that we had an 8-point lead at Clemson with 8 minutes to go, we were 1 score down against Clemson last year. But I probably could not tell you what I had for lunch today, or what my wife told me last night when I got home. That's what you need to know. Many a time, people come to my office and say, oh, Chris is in with someone. He really can't speak to you right now. It's either me talking to myself or listening to sports radio. That's what you need to know a little bit about me. One of my passions. As you heard, I'm also a high school age baseball coach. So I take a varsity baseball team every summer, and we play and compete in what's called American Legion Baseball. So I feel very, very blessed to be able to do that. But one of my greatest passions is my faith. And that's a faith, really, that's brought me to Boston College the last 22 years. Just started my 22nd year here this past August. So the pregame of my talk really centers around where I wasn't in terms of my faith life. So a little bit more about me. I'm an only child. Now, that may surprise some in the room. Others in the room, it may make sense. I like to talk a lot. Didn't have a lot of people around growing up. My mother had me, told family members, friends, that's it. One, that's it. Chris is enough. That's a little bit too much more for me to handle. So I grew up in Wellesley, then Natick, Massachusetts, back in the 1970s. Now, to a lot of you in this room, that's 100 years ago. All right? Me being probably the oldest one in the room right now, I can tell you, it really wasn't that long ago. My mother worked several jobs. My dad was a car salesman, which, again, may make sense. I am the son of a used car salesman. All right? I have to admit that. My mother also went to Mass probably about 6 times a week. And the only time she didn't go to Mass was Saturdays, because she was usually volunteering, usually at the local food pantry, at a shelter, or with our local church. So I used to often remark to her, I was like, Mom, you know, this is great. You're going to Mass, doing all this volunteer work. You don't get extra credit with God for that, you know? I mean, what are you doing all this for? What's the reason? And she'd be just smile back, and she'd probably say something wise, but then she would say, someday you'll figure that out. You'll know why I'm doing this. You'll know why I'm all about that, why that's important, why God in my life, why our faith is important. So again, growing up, went to church on Sundays, went through all of the, again, raised Catholic. I should mention that, of course, raised in the Christian faith, Catholic, went to church. As I got a little bit older, I would challenge going to church. Maybe many of us in this room, you know, no matter how you were raised, whatever your faith tradition, when it came to worship, weekends, challenging. As I got a little bit older, I started to question more things. I was very much in doubt. I was uncertain. I was upset. I really was. You know, I would go to church with my mom. My dad worked most Sundays. And faith really changed for him a little bit. But my mom, real strong in faith. And again, I don't want you to think, hey, Chris, you got to sing here. You got to, you know, say all the... No, she was there. Hey, we're going together. But the messages were not clear. I didn't feel the value. In high school, looking at colleges, I felt good being there with my mom. The priests were nice. But for me, the self-doubt really turned to anger. Why am I being made to go somewhere that I don't want to go? Now, I'll tell you this, friends. It didn't affect my prayer. I was praying. I was praying to God, and still at that point at 16, 17 years old, trying to make sense of who God was. I was raised in a generation where God was very gender specific. Father Michael Himes, in one of my classes in the School of Theology and Ministry, once said, we have this vision of God on high with the lightning bolts and the scepter, and that's really was my vision growing up. But I got to a point where I had a problem. Now, I'll tell you that my mother ran the show between the three of us in our house. My dad out selling the cars. My mom ran the show. She was in charge. So when my mom asked me to do something, I usually tried to follow it. Evidenced by when I was younger. I had this desire, always at the holidays, especially at Christmas, to know what I was getting. Anyone ever have that? You want to know what you're getting. You're younger. I'd love to know what's under the tree or what's being hid in the closet. And we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but enough that we had nice Christmases. So as a young child, maybe even up to high school, I would sneak around a little bit. But when I was younger, my mother gave me a warning. She said, Chris, look. It wasn't even that nice. Mister, look. If you keep peeking around for these gifts, you're going to lose them. And I'm going to take them, I'm going to put them in a garbage bag, and they're going to one of the local shelters. I'm like, no, there's no way that's going to happen. It's not going to happen. It happened. Absolutely happened. Could not help myself. Bagged up everything, watched her go to the New England Home for Little Wanderers, which is still in existence today. And one of the places that she volunteered at. Now, fortunately, my mother loved me, so there were a couple things under the tree that, But that's the point of saying, my mother asked me or told me something, you could really, really, really count on it. But I had this problem. And the problem was this. I didn't want to go to church anymore. I was struggling with the messages. I was struggling with what I was hearing. And it was starting to affect my prayer. Because I was being angry in church, and maybe for no apparent reason, other than I had this self-doubt, I had this challenge to me. I was trying to grapple with what Mass meant and what these messages meant. It was affecting my prayer, and I stopped praying. So God became a very, very different thing for me in that language. So it took me almost 6 months to have that conversation with my mother. And I was terrified because I did not want to hurt or disappoint her. And I knew faith was important to her. And I knew she was passionate about it. I summoned up the courage one night after dinner to say, Mom, I need to talk to you. What's wrong? What did you do today? What happened? Did you do something at school? What happened? I said, no, everything's good. I need to talk to you about church. I'm just not buying it. I'm not feeling it. It's not here. And even back at 17 or 18, right before I went to college, I knew that I needed to feel something. I just didn't know what. And to my astonishment, her reaction was amazing. Thank you for telling me that. I could get a sense that something was wrong. That's her to me. And that's okay. You don't have to go. You'll find your way. God has a plan for you. You may not know what it is right now, but you'll find your way in the journey. Okay. I was off the hook to that point. So I felt like, wow, she's really cool. This is great. She understands where I am, but I didn't really understand what she said. God has a plan on my journey with God. I really didn't understand what that meant. As one of my favorite people in the world would say, more later on that. So I went to college. I volunteered orientation, student government. I went to a small state school here, right up the road, Framingham State, now a university. But I didn't really get into volunteering in terms of helping others. Now, it wasn't that I didn't want to help people. I could have. I was afraid. I've seen my mom do all this volunteer work, service work, and it would be easy, but I had no experience with it, and I was terrified. Plus, I was also terrified of still being really at odds to where I was in my faith life. So I went through college, probably went to church maybe 3 or 4 times during that point. I commuted, so that's a word that you don't hear anymore, and especially for those of you here that are most of our campus residential, of course. I loved living at home. Had my laundry done for me, meals, everything was nice and clean. It was great. It was great. And I'm really glad that I did that, actually. And I was spoiled. I have to admit, I was spoiled. I was a spoiled only child. Not in terms of material, in the material sense, getting a lot of stuff, because you took the garbage bag of toys. So, I wasn't going to get things. But I felt that love. I felt loved. And it came time to look at other options. I took a gap year. Now, back in the late 80s, around that time in college, I'll date myself a little bit, gap years were just like, oh, someone's taking a year to work, someone's taking a year to travel, someone's taking a year to, for me, the gap year was work. And then I applied to graduate programs. And pretty similar to a lot of you right now that might be seniors that think about graduate school, or those graduate students in the audience, it's quite a process. You have to have your resume up to date, letters of reference, applications, not only to the actual school that you're applying for in the major, but also for internships and assistantships. So I applied, and the one school I was really interested in was Fairfield University in Connecticut. At the time, they were marketing themselves as the Jesuit University of Southern New England. Now, I knew they were Catholic. I didn't know what Jesuit meant. I knew that their basketball team had been in the NCAA tournament. I could tell you that as evidence before what I told you about, hey, I know my sports. I knew they were back-to-back tournament years. And I knew they were close to New York City. Other than that, So I went through the application process. And I'll never forget the night that I was accepted. My boss, who to this day is one of my closest friends, called my mother. I was out coaching my Little League team at the time. I was coaching Little League. And he called up and said, I need to talk to your son. I have one more question for him. So I call him back, and he tells me, I have one more question. Would you like to join us on staff? I was like, wow, yes. Get there that August, right as I was starting my time there, my mom disclosed that she'd been diagnosed with esophageal cancer. That's a type of cancer that's at the base of the esophageal tubes. It can be a small growth that can lead to usually some sort of a tumor. So for this only child, that was devastating news. I remember it like it was yesterday. The family, my aunts, cousins, Chris, you can't go. I'm like, what do you mean? You can't go. You can't go to Fairfield. You can't take this assistantship. You can't go to graduate school. You have to stay here with your mother. And I'll never forget, it was the July before I left. My mother, we were on Cape Cod. My mother, it was almost like she summoned the family together for like a family sit down. And she said, he's going. And if anyone tries to stop him, I won't enter into any treatment. Again, you've heard 2 stories. My mother, when she says things, she means it. I knew she meant it, and her sisters knew she meant it at that point. So I ended up going to Fairfield. Several months later, she entered into treatment and eventually went into remission. Fairfield was nothing like I had ever experienced. Faculty and students and Jesuits, these Jesuit priests that I started to learn who they were, welcomed me. I built some wonderful relationships the first few months. In fact, I got invited to a Monday night mass, and they said, oh, Chris, it's not really like mass. It's kind of like a social gathering. Yeah, there's a mass, but then we hang out afterwards. I'm like, okay, I said, geez, I haven't gone to mass. I'm like, oh, it's okay. Just come. You don't have to stay, but just come. Little did I know, and I can remember that invitation. It was Father Jim Hayes, Father Paul Holland, Warren D. Donato, Dave Champy, Sean Lydon, and Jim Fitzpatrick. All of them were like, you've got to come to this Monday night mass. And I'd love to tell you it was like a light switch that got flipped, but it wasn't. It was a work in progress, friends. Nothing's easy. Even back then, in 1989, nothing comes easy. The messages I started to receive were different going to Mass. I was challenged by the words like finding God in all things, reflection, being attentive, being loving, and being a person for and with others. And these were all new to me, I have to tell you. And I didn't, and I'll be the first to say, I didn't do my homework before I got to Fairfield. There's no way. Because if I had, I don't know if I would have went. But then when I got there and I felt so welcomed and warm, I had no choice. So after about a semester, my boss is Jim Fitzpatrick, who's the associate dean, and is now one of the senior VPs down there. He's still there, 44 years. He says, I need some help running the van for the pasta dinners at Prospect House. Now, Prospect House is a shelter and still in existence today. It's actually a very successful shelter where a difference is made in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It's attached to a parish community down there. I'm like, well, Jim, I don't cook, okay? I commuted. I lived at home for college. I didn't cook. I don't cook. I mean, I can drive the van. Okay, just drive the van. I get down there. There's about 27, 28 people. Get all the bread, the pasta, and everything. And Jim says, okay, everyone's served. Why don't you go out and sit with the guests? I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't sign on for that. I didn't come to sit with people. I just came to drive the van. Jim, I told you I just came to drive the van. He said, no. You came to be here. I needed you to be here. God needs you to be here. Well, that freaked me out. That was really, really something to struggle with. So afterwards, I did sit with the guests, went back to my townhouse on campus, and I prayed a little bit. I was kind of finding some meaning back in prayer. And I realized that finding God in all things, well, Jim had seen something in me. And he wanted me to share that and share his love of others and his love of faith by introducing me to that service program. And I stayed with it, as I did with Mass at Fairfield. It was an amazing time because those doubts, the confidence, the uncertainty, the ambiguity, the fear was starting to dissipate a little. I'm not saying it was over and everything was great, no. But it was starting to change. I was starting to change. And then it flipped. 2 months before I was supposed to graduate, I got a call from my dad. And my dad never called me when I was away, ever. Mom's sick. You need to come home. I'm like, what do you mean she's sick? She's cold? Cough? Cough due to cold? No, she's sick. So I went home, and I spent a couple days, and she was telling me that, yeah, they don't know what this is. They think the cancer might be back. But do me a favor. Take my chain. This is a blessed chain that all of our sisters and her had from the Vatican in Rome, way back from the 1970s of the Virgin Mary. She said, take it, hold on to it until I get home. Hold on to it. She didn't make it home. She died 3 days later. So amongst all of the newfound energy or joy was the devastating news that I had lost my mother. A lot of us in this room may have experienced or are experiencing some sort of grief or sickness or loss. Or what I'm telling you is, as an only child at 23, that was as hard as it got. I remember the funeral like it was yesterday, and we pulled up to our church parking lot, church that just got consolidated, meaning it's no longer a church, about 10 years ago, right off of about half hour away on Route 9. And there were two big coach buses, and I'm like, wow, what a time for a tour bus to come in to a church. There's two tour buses out there. Walk into the church, and the entire right side of the church was full with over 100 students, faculty, staff, and Jesuits from Fairfield. That, to me, was God in all things. That was God in my life, working through others. And then maybe it was time for me to start to realize even more fully and more authentically, more genuinely, that I had to start working through others to find God. Now, I had challenges. I didn't get accepted to some programs. I wanted to do the international immersion program. I started to discover social justice and being a person for others. Sorry, Chris, you can't go on the international immersion program. It's only for undergraduates. Yep. Chris, I'm sorry, we can't have you do this service project, be a leader on it, because you're graduating next year. Okay. So amongst all the good things, there was still the challenges. Fast forward a little bit, Boston College, 1996. Wow. I always wanted to be here. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs out here. I remember Alumni Stadium when they had a track you could run around. You could literally walk into the football games and go on the track and watch games. It was unbelievable. And I had the real blessing and fortunate luck to be accepted into a position here way, way back in the day. And that's when I started to realize that I needed to find a way to give back. What was given to me by so many of what I call go-to people, I needed to find a way to give back. And then 22 years ago, I started my journey here. As my mother had told me, you know what? You may not find it now, but that journey she had talked about, it brought me here to BC. And I cannot tell you how blessed I feel to be here. Reading the bio, it's embarrassing, but I've had the luck and fortune to be involved in a lot of things. You know, the campus school, marathon challenge, the international immersion program known as Agape, Kairos, halftime, 48 hours. Not important. But it brought me to all of you. It brought me to alums. It brought me to faculty and staff and Jesuits who have so much passion and have so much in their hearts that fill them up every day. It allows me to be a person that looks at how can I be present to a need despite where I am, despite where I've been, despite where I am right now. Now, to go back to the coaching piece, I like to coach. I like to win. Some of the athletes in the room that know me a little bit know that my fires they're burning out of control. If I could be on that sideline holding a headset or even holding a yard mark on Saturday, I would be. Trust me. That's how much. I mean, my colleagues know. I drive them crazy every day. I drive my wife crazy. But you know what? The blessing is here. The blessing is truly how fortunate and lucky I feel to be here every day. I have friends that have wonderful jobs, and they're wonderful people. And I hear from them how unhappy they are at times. And we talk and we process. But I share with them, I said, you know what? I may not be the best at what I do, and I may not be the most successful, but I try to make a difference in every little piece that I do, just like those along my journey had. But it's not just those people. It was God. You see, friends, I was the obstacle to my relationship. I was the obstacle to my faith journey because I was so ego-centered. I was so success-driven. I just couldn't step out of the way and realize that these things were supposed to be happening for a reason. Again, it's not. I wish I could tell you it's tied up into a nice little bow. It's not. I struggle every day, like all of us. We have amazing faculty, staff, Jesuits, and students, undergraduate and graduate, on this campus. But all of us struggle. The problem is we just don't admit it. We need to find a way to communicate with each other, to talk to one another, just like those conversations I had over the years. And at 52 years old, I'd love to say I have it all figured out. I don't. I really don't. During the World Series, a lot of my team was texting me. There was an epic meltdown in Game 4 of the World Series. Chris Sale, one of the Reds, I'm sorry if there are any Dodgers fans here, but Chris Sale had a meltdown on his team. He went ranting in the dugout. Step up. What's the matter with you? You realize where we are? So a lot of my team texted me and said, Darcy, that's you. That was you before the regional playoffs. That was you. But it also made me realize that it's not about winning. It truly never has been. What it is about ministering in a way that people can form and develop and grow. And my players, my colleagues, my contemporaries, my staff, students that I serve with, That's what it is. I want to leave you with two things. One of the blessings that I have, as I mentioned, is being here at Boston College. Two significant things. If I had not followed the journey, I would never have found my way here to my second master's degree at the School of Theology and Ministry. And I never would have met my wife, who's right over there in the corner, who's a double eagle, at St. Ignatius Church, where we volunteered together. I did every Match.com, every .com, every I'm a nice guy.com. I've been set up with more people, he's a good guy, go out with him .com, than anyone can imagine in the world. Huh? And you know where I met the person that has changed my life? At church. Now, I'm not saying that's for all of us, but the one guy that turned his back on the church and questioned who God was, it was amazing. Friends said to me around the time that I graduated, and 2 years later at my wedding, it's really too bad that your parents can't be here to see you walk at Alumni Stadium and to see you walk down the aisle at St. Ignatius Church. I smiled at them and I said, they'll be there. They'll be there. And I'd like to leave you with something from then Mother Teresa, now Saint Teresa, that really governs and guides who I am. And a lot of you may have heard this before as well, too. This was found on the wall in one of her first homes that she started in Calcutta, Home for Children. People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you're successful, you'll win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you're honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten. Do good anyway. Give the best you have, and sometimes it will never be enough. Give your best anyway. In the final analysis, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. Thank you all so much, and God bless you.